Global citizenship is important because I think what happens in South Africa is affected by the rest of the world. What we did in South Africa affects other parts of the world. People of my generation saw South Africa as their world. That's the world where we were going to work. But today's young people will live in really a global village of sorts. One needs to equip young people to be able to cope well elsewhere for the benefit of this country as well as the rest of the continent. Young people under the age of 35 constitute 66% of South Africa's population. So if a lot of them are unemployed, then obviously we are in a very invidious position, very difficult position. That's on the one side. On the other side, of course, we know that South Africa is blessed with enormous diversity, enormous resources. And so somehow we have to make things work for young people in the first instance, and then for the country secondly. So it's in the country's best interest to solve the problem of unemployment, because one can nearly look at that as the high levels of unemployment as a situation where we are not doing justice to young people, and that problem has to be resolved. And I think we need to employ various strategies to ensure that we can afford a situation to young people, or conditions to young people, that will enable them to self-actualize. And of course, working is one of the ways in which young people can actualize themselves. In the academic sector, I mean, I believe that one can prepare young people to be part of, I suppose, the world of work by giving them the necessary resources, necessary skills before they enter the world of work. But before they can enter the world of work, they obviously have a very long trajectory, lots of things they have to do in order to acquire the skills that are critical in the world of work. We realize in South Africa that our pass rates, our success rates for students are not particularly high. And that's not, and I believe very strongly, this is a message I tried to convey to my colleagues when I was still active at the University of Pretoria. Sometimes when students are not successful, that might be attributed to factors in their environment which lead to the lack of success. For argument's sake, I mean, if students come from a very poor background, there's a lack of resources, and that obviates or prevents them from being as successful as one would want them to be. But very frequently, it's also about what's happening in the system that prevents them from being successful. If we have a high failure rate for a particular module, very frequently one might have the attitude that this year's students are not well equipped, they are not adequately equipped to pass the course. But on the other hand, and it's a critical area that we as academics have to look at, what is it that we are doing wrong that prevents young people from becoming successful? So that's something that we worked on quite hard when I was at the University of Pretoria. We were constantly looking at what prevents success from our side, and to enable to ensure, therefore, that the conditions are appropriate for students to be successful. We always, wherever I was, I mean, always made a point of ensuring that if you have a teaching and learning committee, that students have to be part of that committee, that their opinions need to be heard. It's not an add-on, but it's key to what you are doing, because when we're offering teaching, they are the ones who are learning, and obviously, I mean, there's a dialectic involved. I mean, the one informs the other, and it's critically important that students' voices around teaching also get heard. They are the ones who know what their needs are, and those need to be articulated within those teaching and learning committees. The same applies everywhere else. I mean, if we are going to tackle issues of gender-based violence, if we are going to tackle issues of racial discrimination or gender discrimination, those who are bearing the brunt of that discrimination need to be part of the discussion. And we need to create those of us who have positions of influence in whatever institution, whatever industry, we need to create the conditions for young people to be part of that discussion. Obviously, we're not going to solve that crisis, that problem overnight. Obviously, there are areas in the economy that must do better in order to create enough opportunities for employment for young people. But I do not believe that. I do believe that that alone won't suffice. That alone won't allow as many people as we'd want, young people as we'd want to become employed. What we worked on very strongly in the positions that I previously held was, in fact, the whole notion of students becoming their own employers. So in other words, to become entrepreneurs, to create employment rather than to move into employment. Moving into employment, I think, will always be an important option. But on the other hand, there's a very exciting option, just given the numbers of young people we have in this country, the potential which they have to utilize that potential in order for them to create something that will not only ensure their own income, but also ensure the income of other people. So entrepreneurship amongst young people, I think, will become critically important, not only in South Africa, but on the continent. But we've got a large and a healthy population of young people. If they are given the affordances to self-actualize, I mean, one can really have a very vibrant situation in South Africa as well as the rest of the continent. In the world of work of the future of the 21st century and the latter part of the 21st century, obviously it will be important, it will be critically important that they are digitally astute. In other words, that they can inhabit the digital world with ease. And now, of course, in South Africa and Africa, the rest of the world, we know that there's a big digital divide. Those who have access to the resources and those who don't. And the argument very frequently is that those who don't have access to resources, digital resources, will be left behind, and they won't be able to set the agenda for the future. But I believe that governments need to take responsibility for ensuring that the resources are there, because if our young people do not have access to the world, to the digital world, they are going to be left behind. When I look at young people at our universities, I mean, they are so adept at making that shift. Very frequently, academics are reticent or hesitant about making that shift because I suppose they are products of their time, they are products of their own socialization. But young people inhabit, to a certain extent, a different world, they were born into a world where the digital was already present. I mean, people of my generation became used to the digital after your postgraduate studies. I mean, so it's something that one has to learn, and so there's a level of hesitancy on our part, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the case with young people. Young people, I suppose, can make use of the opportunities that the digital world affords us to be creative and to create a livelihood for themselves. The important thing in South Africa is that one should also see the potential of young people being creators of products in the digital world. We need not only be consumers of what the digital world affords us, because if we are only consumers, then we get dictated to by parameters that have been set in another part of the world, in a more privileged part of the world, and we then have to subsume our aspirations and our ways of being and our ways of doing to what has been determined elsewhere. We need to create products that are useful for ourselves and for our continent and for the needs of the continent. People of my generation saw South Africa as their world. That's the world where we were going to work, and a whole lot of reasons for that. I mean, the policies of the government at the time, the fact that, I mean, travel was not all that easily accessible by everyone, etc. But today's young people will live in really a global village of sorts. Global citizenship is important because I think what happens in South Africa is affected by the rest of the world. What we live in South Africa affects other parts of the world. We see this currently. I'm not going to provide examples because I think viewers will think of immediate examples. So it's important. I mean, when once again, when we were students, when we were young, we thought our focus was on the problems in South Africa and solving those problems, and correctly so as well. But now, when we look at the SDGs, when we look at the situation of the world, I mean, the wars, these terrible situation of war-inflicted violence on so many communities, we realize that we have a responsibility not only to our immediate context, but we have a responsibility, and young people have a responsibility to other parts of the world. And I suppose at that level, become involved in the solution in solving not only South African problems, but solving problems that affect other parts of the world. It's that where we embody a spirit of global citizenship, to see our responsibility exceeding the local, the immediate, and extending to people who are marginalized and on the margins of society everywhere else in the world.